Hello, this is the sequence lifecycle kubeadm office hours. Today is the 15th of January 2020. Please add your names and topics to the agenda document. I'm going to share it in chat. All right, and share my screen. Okay, new participants to the call. Anybody wants to present themselves?
Hey, I'm Ben Moss. I'm a SIG Windows contributor from, well, formerly of Pivotal, now of VMware. Hoping to talk about some of this kubeadm for Windows stuff we've been doing, and revising the KEP that was created.
Ben, can you please add this as an agenda item after the PSAs?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Let's continue with some of the PSAs. So this is, I added some release-related updates. The first one is that the schedule for 118 is already out. You can see it at this document. And an interesting date for us is that the deadline for the KEPs is the 28th. The KEP for kubeadm moving out is already in review. I'm going to address some of the comments today and tomorrow because a lot of comments accumulated. And also something to note is that the release is right before KubeCon, so I'm not sure who is going to be able to work on stuff before that. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, so the end of March, so the release is like right before KubeCon. KubeCon is starting on the 30th, I believe.
Oh, I hope there will be no shift on this date.
Sorry?
If there will be a shift on this date, this will be difficult to manage.
I doubt that they're going to shift it.
It happened in the past that the release date shifted by 1 week, and this overlaps with KubeCon basically.
Oh yeah, so it's unlikely that they're going to shift it before in time, but forward in time, it's plausible. Maybe like occasionally they shift it a couple of days, but yes, I saw this as well. If it overlaps with KubeCon, it's going to be very hard for the release team. For us, for the kubeadm people, I don't think it's going to affect us that much.
Okay.
All right. I wanted to ask, do I have any, so I wanted to do a triage of the enhancement repository, but I wanted to ask, does anybody have any other KEPs aside from the Windows KEP we are going to talk about later, the kubeadm moving out KEP? Fabrizio Rosti, do you have any KEPs to be merged?
I have one about getting rid of the cluster status.
Okay.
I can post the link.
Do you want this KEP to see review? Do you want it merged as soon as possible?
I would like to work it in this cycle. So there are the only pending point is that basically if we are going, there is a general agreement on the KEP. The only pending point is that if we are going to remove the status from the current from the kubeadmin config, or if we are going to leave it there, even if kubeadmin is stopping to use it, because maybe someone is using them and we don't want to break them.
My opinion is that we should leave it. Do you think it's possible to still update it, like update it correctly, but have this alternative path?
Yeah, I can make it possible it in a way that kubeadmin write the status, but don't use the status. It use a new method which is described in the cap internally.
And also we have to leave, I guess, kubeadm reset to also clean this status.
Yes. So I'm basically not cleaning up the code except for the read part.
Yes. So this proposal is going to add new code, but not remove the the existing structure.
We are going to add a new code, raise have a deprecation message or an action item, and in the next cycle we are going to remove.
Do you think we should do it for with a GA policy, because it's essentially implementation detail? But do you think we should follow GA for this one?
I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion. So
technically, HA is considered a beta feature, so maybe we can get away with having a beta deprecation policy for this.
I'm fine.
I think that beta is probably the most appropriate policy, simply because both HA and the configs are in beta state right now.
Okay. I guess if you want to add this detail to the cap, and also, I guess we can. So this is something that it's implementable from the start, but should we always merge as provisional and then iterate or implementable? Or if the cap is agreeable by everybody, should we have a case where we merge directly with implementable? That's should it be a separate PR?
I think that we can merge it as an implementable, but if you want to make a separate PR.
Okay, let's proceed with implementable for this one.
In the past, I already have kept merged in implementable state. So
yeah, I know. Maybe you have to change this detail about that we spoke about today, and the cap is in a good state, I think. Okay, Rossi, do you have caps?
Not on kubeadm.
So those are component standard API machinery caps?
Yeah, I have one in preparation for a cycle or two, for like component standard work, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay, let's get back to this list after we start doing the triage today. Another quick PSA here is that kubeadm is going to have a deep dive session. Tim, Justin, and the others discussed this yesterday. Rosti and Rafael proposed that they can have this session. I don't have any other comments on that. I saw the recording from yesterday. I just wanted to mention it. Okay, Ben, we can go to your topic now.
All right. So, as I'm sure most of you are aware of, there's this kubeadm for Windows kept. Oh, I should probably link to that. But so it got kind of to like the alpha state where there's like it was done as like where there's like a wrapper script, like essentially a program that's like doing a bunch of extra work on top of kubeadm for in large part because of the lack of like host network and privileged containers on Windows. So doing things like installing kubeproxy and installing CNI but also still working around some things on Windows that aren't done, like still aren't done by kubeadm. And so the approach that I've been exploring, and I'm now like, well, so I've talked to SIG Windows about this and have general approval there, but it's using a, like, what I'm calling like a privileged process proxy. It's like a program that will run on the host that will allow containers to launch processes essentially running as host processes, giving us the ability to use daemon sets to do kubeproxy and CNI. And so hopefully, well, like getting us on Windows a lot closer to the way things work on Linux, and eliminating the need for this like wrapper script around kubeadm. But so what this kind of means is that we need to revise the KEP to reflect this. Like the KEP was written in such a way where it seemed like there was sort of a, like, there's a bunch of stuff about like maybe review when we get to beta, whether we'll use daemon sets. It's kind of unclear, like, but I think now we want to switch it to be a lot more explicit that we're going to have this approach of using this host service that will enable privilege operations. So yeah, I mean, one big question is just like, should we revise the KEP, like, and kind of what does that mean for the KEP? Like, is it, or should we like start a new KEP that's like reflects this new approach? I'm inclined to just edit it, and
I personally consider KEPs like living documents. So I'm in favor to having a review of the KEP, so it's also easier for people to spot the difference between the previous approach, the current approach, and so on and so forth. So
yeah,
I'm +1 for editing the current one.
okay. And then one thing that I've noticed, just like that I think hasn't been resolved, is the kubelet configuration. This was like called out in the KEP that kubeadm needs to support like a separate Windows kubelet configuration. And I don't know, this doesn't, as far as I know, it wasn't ever done. In the like wrapper script that was created right now, a bunch of like the kubelet service that's created just has a bunch of like Windows specific command line flags, and we ignore the kubelet configuration config map.
Okay.
So
So the process we should take here is, so first of all, I'd like to clarify that me and Ben already had multiple meetings about this on private. I don't think that we should integrate all of that into kubeadm yet. So there still has to be a wrapper script.
okay,
Basically, your existing work here in this repository, I think we should take this approach for now. We can have the binary, the proxy binary deployed by the script, and also the script can manage the separate kubelet configuration abstraction as well.
yeah, I've been doing it, I guess, less as a wrapper, but more of just like you still will run kubeadm join yourself. Like it just, it's more of a provisioning, a pre-script. I'm hoping that we can stay out of the business of like wrapping the actual kubeadm commands.
Yes. So this could be deployed as a pre-step in terms of like, hey, I want to set up the services, and then the users in the docs for the users have to be updated to instruct them to simply call kubeadm, and it's going to work. I think the KEP has to be updated to modify these two sections. So this is, I think this remains the same at this point. But however, it's still not clear what path are we using.
Yeah.
So for now, the scripts are using something like C / K. That's it.
Yeah. I've been just using Linux paths like Etsy and all that.
Honestly, I have an argument with Michael, who is the chair of SigWindows, that we should not push this feature without getting some of these details clear, because we have to secure all the paths, and if they're not secure, we cannot graduate this feature to beta. But I think for your question, like in terms of the implementation you have been working on, the kubeproxy deployment and CNI deployment sections have to be modified.
Yeah.
And also, I guess any potential mentions of wrapper script have to be revised, so because we're changing the what the wrapper script is. It's not a wrapper script anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to raise this to this group too, to get, I don't know, just give a heads up.
Yes. Any comments from other folks?
I have only a comment with regard to the kubelet. Is that if we want to that kubeadmin join install a different kubelet config in case of Windows, I see this as a small change, and it is. I think that this is doable and acceptable in kubeadmin, assuming that we in the document that explain how to set up the new let me say the new configuration, we make it clear that the user is responsible to create this config map.
Something about the flags that we have to pass to the kubelet on Windows is that basically we need, if we are going to do this change in kubeadm, I need a table that explains what flags are part of the kubelet configuration, because some of these flags, to my understanding, are not part of the kubelet configuration. So we have to pass this command line in any case. This is the setup for the Windows service. And currently we are, I guess, avoiding. So Ben, I think we are writing the kubelet configuration on disk with the kubeadm join. And kubeadm is using this same configuration. So I don't even know what the problem there is. Why should we manage it differently on Windows?
Oh, because we need these command line overrides. Like the
Sorry, you muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. Because we still need these command line overrides on Windows, like setting resolve conf to blank string and like changing the pause image.
Yeah, but some of these are not possible to be set from the kubelet configuration.
Yeah, but I think some of them are deprecated as command line flags.
That's true.
I proposed, okay, I think that I'm super happy that I see this moving, and also moving with getting rid of the script. I'm happy. So I think that we should iterate on the cap addressing detail flags by flag, so or considering the two options, which is provide so make mini install, so having only one copy of the config map somewhere in the cluster and install, or something else that we have to figure out. But I'm happy that there is a way forward for this.
Yeah.
So again, the deadline for the cap changes that have to be merged is the 28th of this month. Do you think you can manage to include these changes by then?
I hope so.
Right. Yeah, just poke us for review, and we can take a look at the changes.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention that this opens the very easy option to test the kubeadm/Windows feature on Coaster API AWS, because Ben tested this already. With the other solution, we enter some complications that you have to execute the whole previous wrapper script using a port of Cloud Init on Windows. In this new solution, we still have to have the port of Cloud Init, maybe, but you see the script is much simpler, and basically this is a much more friendly to the Cluster API.
I'm plus 100 to using Cluster API.
Okay, Ben, if you want to mention also Cluster API in the KEP, feel free to do so. It's a nice detail for people that want to read the KEP.
Okay.
All right. Next topic. Does anybody have agenda items? Because I wanted to focus on issue triage for the rest of the meeting, pretty much.
I did have a question, and it came up in a broader SIG cluster lifecycle meeting, so I wanted to bring it up with this group. Is that I know we talked about resourcing of, we want to work on the kubeadm operator, and we have an initial first pass. There's a broad group of use cases that we get pinged on pretty regularly, where the kubeadm operator would be a very useful tool to have in our arsenal, such as CA server rotation, as well as declarative style upgrades for in-place modification without us having to do the running around the cluster using something like kubespray or whatever. So I know it's not a priority for this cycle, but I do think that it will come pretty fast. So if people are interested, or if we can try to build some mind share around this so that people kind of realize that this is the next big thing probably for kubeadm outside of moving out a tree, where there's a lot of impact that could affect a lot of people.
I'm not sure how we can proceed with announcing this. There are multiple channels we can ask at. For instance, the kubeadm Slack channel. We can also ask the KDEV. I'm not sure what the consequences of this action is going to be, like who is going to show up.
I think the contributor summit is a good place to talk about this stuff, as well as your deep dive session at KubeCon, because those are going to be people who are actively trying to engage in the community. So I think that's probably your target audience. I think you might want to solicit or have a set of questions for folks on the kubeadm Slack channel, but that could also be looking into the sun. There's a lot of people there, but getting their feedback on some of the key behavioral features that they would want to implement is probably pretty important too.
So if we ask people, if we mention this to people, we are also in a way advertising it. And I'm going to defer to Fabrizio if he thinks that this in its current state is something that we should even mention to people without us getting it ourselves to the point where it's, in a good shape.
I think so. Of course, I'm pushing on the protocol since time, so I'm definitely interested in this, even if now I don't have much time to work on it. But I want to, first of all, it's something that we already talked at the last KubeCon, and we got interesting feedback from the people. Second, I have sent a CFP for the next KubeCon, and the topic is the operator, and so I'm definitely interested in getting people, users, giving feedback about the possible use case, and even feedback about of their expectation about in terms of user experience. I'm also really interested in finding people that willing to help in developing this and testing this operator.
Okay, so before KubeCon, I guess the question is, should we address potential discussions in the CAP that remain, or should we just ask the people that this is experimental work and that the CAP is not merged because it's risky for them. If we don't merge the CAP ever, we don't give them any guarantees that their contribution is going to make it in kubeadm officially.
I'm not worried. We have to be clear about the fact that this is experimental and that we are seeking for ideas and then we are going to experiment and select the best one. So I'm not worried. This is part of the alpha beta GA game, or at least I consider it so. What I think is that it is we should have a separate meeting and try to pay attention on how we express our question, because we should be clear. We should avoid confusion with cluster PI, with the mutable approach. So it is not, let me say, easy to fire a simple question. You have to give some context around this.
Okay, so actionable items before KubeCon, I guess one of them is this having this separate meeting, and then the question is, should we email, for instance, KDEF and ask for help there, or kubeadm Slack channel?
Let's try to have the meeting soon. Let's consider this like an announcement, and so we try to get to at least to shape out our mind around this before the end of the month, and then according to this we define the action item.
Okay. Just to clarify, by next KubeCon, you mean Amsterdam? You send a call for paper there?
Yes, Amsterdam.
All right. So let me clarify this as well. All right, I'm going to leave it to you when you want to book the meeting. Just ping the channel and we can arrange.
Okay, just to I don't know, Tim, if you want to join or someone else. Otherwise, we are almost everyone in Europe, so just to book it in a free slot.
I'm okay with listening to it after the fact, just to make sure it's recorded and pushed to YouTube and do the standard broadcast procedures.
I would like to also listen to it.
Okay, so I will planning more or less around this time one day. Thank you.
All right. Any other topics before the issue triage? Let's proceed. Last time we got to spend some time looking at the existing Kubernetes enhancement tickets that we have. And I believe the last item was this one. This is assigned to Yasin. The next one, let me search for it. Advanced configuration with kubeadm using customize. I guess this is, we are not making changes in this cycle, or rather we had a discussion here. Let me check. Yes, so we should talk about this during the meeting.
Yeah, I think that we can move this to beta, and and you are right, there are no graduation criteria in the CAP. So, but I think that we are already in a good shape because we have an end-to-end test for it. So I think that it makes sense to update the CAP, adding beta criteria, which are basically having an end-to-end test, an end-to-end signal on the feature. And then for me, we can plan to graduate, which means to rename a flag.
So I think that probably we can wait an extra cycle before moving to beta, simply because Customize is not entirely free of its own problems, and I want to be absolutely sure before moving something like this to beta.
Yeah, so please go ahead. I had a comment as well.
Please go ahead with the comment. I'm fine with any opinion. It's just that it's a feature that is there. We don't have negative report, so I don't see problem to keep it to promote it.
Yeah, I just had a question because I was observing some of the discussions around Customize potentially consuming this feature, and I think the concern there was that the kubeadm bootstrap provider has to allow passing the -- customize flag on the command line, and because the feature is not fully graduated, they didn't want to do it. And also one of the problems there was that you have to write the files to disk. Do you think that it's a good idea for the feature before graduating to beta to support any blob of patch, pretty much, instead of requiring these files to be written on disk, for instance?
What do you mean with any blob?
I'm talking about supporting a way to specify the patches in a configuration file that is accessible, for instance, from the Cluster API Bootstrap provider kubeadm configuration. This means probably piping the feature in our kubeadm API.
I'm not sure that I follow, but if there is some requirement from Cluster API, I'm happy to discuss them. I don't see, as far as I know, the booster provider, I don't see problem for the booster provider to write a file. It is already writing many other files, so I don't see problem in having it writing the patch as well. But I'm open to discuss it. So I will ping Chuck or Vince to see if they have a clear requirement for this.
I'm also concerned about Customize. After seeing some of the changes they wanted to make in core Kubernetes, I honestly think that we should follow what Kind did, and Kind dropped Customize in favor of raw API machinery. But that's like changing the scope of this feature completely.
What does kubectl do? Did kubectl drop the Customize?
Yeah, there were pretty much the Customize folks wanted to do something that is so disruptive to Kubernetes that some of the discussions escalated to kubectl potentially dropping Customize support completely.
Well, I think then in that case, I would totally hold. I think jurisprudence says let's wait and see. It's an experimental feature. I do know people use it because it's super useful, and they use it probably in a very limited fashion. They're not using like all the features and capabilities. and let's hold and see how the community goes around customize, because all we really care about is the ability to patch our manifests. That's it, right? And having a standard way that we use this that mechanism inside of our community. And we try to follow kubectls' lead, but if they're rethinking this and if they're going to change things, then let's hold.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm okay with holding. Nevertheless, I will try to understand what are the requirements from cluster API.
Yeah, and at some point I promised that I wanted to provide a completely alternative solution because if you remember the discussion around fighting our own sandbox we had when this feature was proposed, but I never got the time to propose changes. But my changes require modifying the kubeadm API to allow these customizations without patches. But yeah, it's a complicated topic. Okay, let's hold on this cap on this feature and look at the rest. Standard CRI for component validation. Rusty, this is on hold. I guess API machinery have to review.
So this isn't getting any discussion this cycle, and it's part of the workgroup component standard effort. So I don't think it's kubeadm specific.
All right. This is the cap by Lee. I guess this cap requires more review, more comments being answered. Does anybody have an update on this?
Hi, I'm here. I have not responded to some of the open questions that have been posted. The implementation of a lot of the suggestions of this cap is mostly complete, but still undergoing rebase on top of Rusty's component config work. So,
okay.
The PR should be done or should be in a green state again by the end of this week. And then I will revisit some of the questions in this cap. It's notable that a sizable portion of the feature set for the add-ons extensions, it does support raw manifests, but it also uses heavy adoption of customize. So that's just adds some color to some of those comments we were just making.
Okay. Please make updates to the PR and the cap. Everybody who has the time, please continue reviewing this cap. This is a question styles discussion. Fabrizio mentioned that we can proceed with this work. Any other comments on this?
Just a question regarding the deprecation. I guess a release note will be enough, right? We don't need to warn anything on the output of kubeadm, right?
So it's an interesting question whether we should print a message. I personally think that an action required in the release note with the deprecation basically announcement is sufficient for this, and I don't have to persist something on the COI.
Makes sense in my opinion.
I agree as well.
Okay. This is about the cluster status, new kubeadm component config schema. Rossi, I don't remember what this is.
Yeah, so this is the implementation of the new component config stuff. So it's basically in implementation right now, and I have something like PRs, 2 in a whip state, which actually implement the same thing but in different ways. I'm probably going to close one of them.
Yes, I want to get to the PRs, the PR triage as well. So I have an interesting question for you. How are you going to respond to this? Because it's not alpha, it's not beta.
Yeah, I'm just seeing this comment right now, so I'll go for it.
I guess you can also link to the PR saying that we are making decisions still.
Yeah.
All right. Node maintenance lease for deserts operations. This is definitely cost life cycle, but it's more sig node, so I'm going to skip it. This Michael from Red Hat. Move kubeadm out of Kubernetes. This is the cap that I'm doing. I already mentioned this. Yeah, everybody can comment on that. I can try addressing the comments today and tomorrow, but there's way too many comments. Hopefully, I'm going to give an update by the end of the week on this. Instance specific, this is a cost life cycle, but I'm going to argue that it's API machinery as well. Lee, what do you think?
I have not read through this cap yet, but it is important. Sorry, I missed the rest of your prefix.
Yeah, this is the cap by Michael Taufen about instance-specific component config. I wanted to add the working group component standard in API machinery here, because so that it's not only cluster.
Oh yeah, adding both of those totally makes sense. Thanks.
All right, and we are finished with the triage of this repository. Now, do people have any preference if we go to the PRs or issues in Kubernetes/kubeadm? Okay, I'm going to go to the PRs in that case. We only have a couple of pages, so maybe we should start from the oldest first. Some of this is from last year, but they are not stale. Only this one is stale. Okay, let me go quickly through these because I honestly forgot some of them. Image GC whitelist calls mentioned in the issue. So this is making a change in kubeadm, but it's making a change in the kubelet, I think. Yeah, this is the kubelet API change. So this is not on us, pretty much. Make out transport support HTTP. My assumption is that, okay.
How is this not the case nowadays?
I mean,
I made this code change like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I'm confused why the PR is also on hold. It's a necessary base. Maybe just Mike Denise doesn't have the time. This PR pretty much is lacking reviewers and of course rebase. I guess we can skip it for now.
Typically, anything that has that many SIGs on the list are not germane to us. It's just something that cuts horizontal.
Yeah. So let's keep this one as well. Service account tokens. This SIG out clearly. Readiness liveness process for kube proxy. I believe we had a discussion about this one, and the conclusion was that Mr. Hon from Google said that it's probably not a good idea to make this change because of the restarts it's going to cause. So I'm also going to skip this PR. At this point, I don't really want to proceed with it anyway, so I'm not sure what the author plans for it. move Bootstrap tokens with use of version API. So I tried to explain to Dixu that we are graduating Bootstrap tokens like officially to GA in the docs, but this is something that doesn't really like most of this PR. Jordan did not approve of it because he thought that. I mean, it makes sense to expose these utilities, but like the maintainers of this particular code does not want to have this change. So it's really up to Dixu to now have discussion. He has not responded to the latest comments. All right, add script to check duplicate imports in Go file. This is by Stuart. It's touching kubeadm, but it's stale. I'm not going to look at it right now. This is by Legit. I believe it sets automatically the API version in kind of list items. However, it has not seen any updates. And it's work in progress, has been a work in progress for a while. This is a PR that ideally we want to have at some point. It's from Obitech, who has been contributing to the working group component standard. The TLDR of the PR is that it takes our utility to split YAML documents into GVKs and it puts it into the component-based repository. I'm not sure what's the state of this. I see LGTM approved for it. Sorry, it's not LGTM'd. I guess I have to respond to the comments here. So maybe it's up to me now. Rossi, did you have the time to review this?
Yeah, I think that I reviewed it, and we actually discussed this a long time ago in one of the workgroup component standard meetings. And I think that the general consensus there was that we should actually look at some of the other tools that probably do the same thing, and for example, kubeadm. But I'm not sure what happened after that.
I recall working with Obitech directly, pair programming on this issue, and he put together a Google document describing the approach for how this functions in multiple areas in Kubernetes, including kubectl. And we found other issues with the way that like YAML is kind of guessed on and all kinds of interesting streams. But yeah, I can follow up with him if that's what's desired here. He's taken on some other work already in the SIG or in the working group, but yeah, this is solid work, and it's code that's existing, and it's just a matter of whether it's the right abstraction to really be continuing to work on.
So to summarize this, the PR is not ready for LGTM because we have to get back to some aspects of the YAML marshalling.
There's some unknowns as to whether this is the one shared abstraction, but this abstraction is existing in the code, and it's mostly a refactor that cleans things up. But yeah, Alex did additional work to understand what the different abstractions are, and that is documented, and I can ask him to follow up on that before we decide whether to merge this or close it.
Okay, thanks. Please comment on the PR as well so that we can see
Okay.
an update.
Yeah, I will comment on the PR with that info and then post it in the component standard agenda and ping him about it.
All right, thanks. Next, prevent bootstrap of nodes with node names. Rossi, I saw that you pretty much agree on the latest changes with minor comments, I think, but I didn't have the time to look at what you're saying. you want a better message to the user, I guess.
Yeah, I think that this was the only thing.
Okay. To be honest, with this PR, I'm not really happy that. So in kubeadm, we have multiple ways to get the node name. I believe Fabrizio originally created a way to get the node name from the kubelet configuration file on disk. Do you remember this, Fabrizio?
Yes, and there is also an issue that is tracking that this is a hack, a workaround, why we find a better solution.
Yeah. And my approach was this. I added get node name from hostname, which is a wrapper that is now used in a couple of locations, but it's not used in your code for the kubelet config. So in kubeadm, we still have these multiple ways. So I was kind of okay with to proceed with this way for this particular use case, and maybe refactor your way in the future. But that was my only concern about this PR, and if I can change the error message that Rossi requested. But if anybody else has comments, we can potentially merge this because it has been for a few months already pending. I'm sure that Jordan also has comments, but you know, he did not respond to review requests.
I took note. I will try to make another pass this week.
Okay, thanks.
I will review as well.
All right. Prevent bootstrap. Next, how much time we got? 7 minutes. This is on SIG node. Somebody is adding a new field to the kubelet configuration. It's touching kubeadm. So with this is an interesting something interesting that's going to happen to kubeadm when we move it to a new repository. Somebody modifies the kubelet configuration because people add new fields to the kubelet configuration all the time without changing the version of the API. This means that maybe some of our unit tests in the kubeadm repo are going to fail if such changes are made without us seeing them.
We really need to take the component configuration or talk with the component standard people, particularly talk with Mike Toppin about making the API be a first-class renderable thing. Like the contract for componentry should be an external thing in reality that just gets used. So if it's in staging, it should be posted out, and there's all the other details with regards to API versioning schema and everything else should really apply to component config.
Yeah, a certain problem with API machinery as well is that they are completely fine with adding fields. For instance, to something that is alpha, they add new fields to the structure, but they do not bump the version. I think they do not agree for beta, but the kubelet configuration has a history of adding fields without bumping the version, which is very problematic.
Yeah, that's super problematic. I've seen this before too. This happened with the proxy a long time ago. Yeah.
However, this would only happen if there is no defaulting code in the kubelet, right, for these new fields.
Well, it depends. Sometimes when they add the new fields, it's because it's something that's critical. So like they want some default specification or override or something there. And we've seen issues, I think, crop up a multiple number of times where the field not existing caused an issue, in the sort of version scheme mismatch.
Yep, that's not great.
This is so some of these changes we have to evaluate basically when we move out kubeadm. But I'm starting to think that when we move out, we are going to start seeing some of these problems. It's completely expected to see some of them, and we have to think of solutions. Predicting the whole future is not going to be possible for us. That's a point that I try to make in the KIP, that we just have to do it at some point. Okay, so this is moving packages. It's by Clayton. This is not on us. I mean, it's touching kubeadm, but import boss reverse import. This is, I don't have context on this, but my assumption is that it's touching the kubeadm import boss file, maybe. Yes, and it's not being approved, so we can skip it. Implement structured output. This PR is pretty much on hold because me and Rossi didn't like what the implementation looked like. Ed Bartosz also confirmed that he does not like it as well. Basically, the discussion we are trying to have here is that whether we need buffered or non-buffered output when we print some of the commands, the structured output of some of the commands, and thus far the idea is that for like most of our commands we don't need unbuffered output. But yes, I guess Bartosz is going to get back on to this and ping us for review, because I think he understands what updates he has to make.
Okay, maybe I try to take a look. So can you tell me the number of the PR?
I'm going to share the link in chat.
Thank you very much.
Basically, he already started working on a similar PR, but for the images subcommand. The problem is that I saw that he started duplicating structures. It's really, the implementation needs more discussion, pretty much. All right, so let's move to the final one. We have 2 minutes. Whitelisting of static post labels. So this is something that I wanted to do for 118, but the original work in the KEP was on hold, mostly because the last cycle was a short one, and the SIG out folks didn't have the time to address most of the comments on a certain pending PR. In any case, we are not going to make this change. Maybe in 118, I'm not sure, but I'm just having the PR on hold. It's following the logic of the KEP. So I think we are out of time. Let me mark this. Let me copy this. I'm going to mark where we are at so that we can continue next time. I just want to finish the triage of the PRs and do some triaging of the kubeadm issues as well, because we are very behind on this aspect. All right. So thanks everybody. See you next week.
See you. Bye.